Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us and making the time to learn about the NTP Creation and Touring grant process. We're really happy to be able to provide this for you today. NEFA's offices are located on the lands of the Massachusetts Wampanoag Nipmuc peoples, and we acknowledge their continued relationship to this land. My name is Kita Sullivan. I am the Senior Program Director for Theater at NEFA. I am a middle-aged Native and Black woman with shoulder-length gray hair, a blue scarf, and a background that shows my homelands, earth, sky, and water.
And
I'm on the lands, also on the lands of the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Massachusetts peoples.
And my name is Derek Schwartz. I'm the program coordinator for theater here at NEFA. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am also calling in from the land of the Massachusetts Wampanoag and Nipmuc people. I am a upper 20s white man with clear rimmed round glasses and a red sweater. I'm sitting in a room with green walls and some art on the walls behind me. And I'm kind of covered in cat hair right now.
This information should be useful whether you are new to NTP or seasoned veteran of the NTP process. We hope we can provide you with the information you need going forward with the Creation and Touring grant.
We will also be hosting a live question and answer session on Zoom on February 2nd. And you can find a link to register for that session on the NEFA website on the National Theater Project Creation and Touring grant page. If you have any specific questions after watching the video, we would love to hear from you at that meeting. If you're watching this video after February 2nd, the recording of the question and answer session should be available on the NEFA website as well, in the same place where you found the link for this webinar.
What we are going to cover today: who is NEFA? National Theater Project Overview. What does a Creation and Touring grant support? NEFA's EDIA statement. The criteria for the grant. Our COVID response. What is a development partner? The timeline for application. Who are the NTP advisors? The application process and frequently asked questions. The narrative question overview and video samples.
Before we go into the NTP grant, we want to just give a little bit of context about the New England Foundation for the Arts. NEFA is a service organization that also acts as a funder, investing in artists and creative communities. NEFA invests in artists and communities and fosters equitable access to the arts, enriching the cultural landscape in New England and the nation. NEFA accomplishes this by granting funds to artists and cultural organizations, connecting them to each other and their audiences, and analyzing their economic contributions. NEFA serves as a regional partner for the National Endowment for the Arts, New England State Arts Agencies, and private foundations. And even though the National Theater Project is run out of NEFA, we are a national program, so folks are invited to apply from anywhere in the United States.
So we are here to talk about the National Theater Project, which is a national program. NTP promotes the development of artist-led ensemble and device theater work while extending the reach and life of these projects through touring. Our lead funding comes from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, with additional funding from the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation. Created in 2010 to explore if the national dance model could support devised and ensemble theater, the NTP Creation and Touring grant is more than just the grant. There are the grants for creation and touring, artist development grant for a handful of finalists who do not receive the full Creation and Touring grant, a cohort meeting between grantees and advisors, and travel grants for presenters to see supported work.
Each year, the National Theater Project is able to give 10 creation and touring grants. These grants are given to US-based devised theater ensembles and individual artists who have identified collaborators. Projects vary greatly in timeline, scale, and touring interests. All of these projects must have one committed development partner, but the nature of those relationships varies greatly depending on the needs of the project. The grant award ranges from $80,000 to $130,000, with some portion of that money allocated to development funds and the rest allocated for touring support, which we will talk about in just a second. After receiving the grant, grantees must submit a tour plan to NEFA within 2 years that outlines where they will be touring the work with NTP subsidies. And like I just said, NTP funding is divided into 2 categories, creation and touring. After the creation and touring grant is awarded, NTP staff conduct conversation with the grantees and NTP advisors to decide how to divide the grant money into those 2 buckets. Each project is different, but typically we will allocate $30,000 to $80,000 for creation, and that money is issued as more or less unrestricted payments for the artists to spend at their discretion. The remaining grant money is set aside as artist-directed allocations, which will be distributed to presenters. These funds can support up to 50% of the artist fee for any given engagement. That money is paid directly to the presenter, but the funds are released at the discretion of the artist. In other words, you would tell us how much of your touring subsidy you would want to give to each organization that presents your work. This funding reduces the cost of presenters who want to present your work, which can open all sorts of possibilities for how the work tours. People use different strategies for allocating that funding, and some folks might give large subsidies to a handful of presenters, or you might decide to give smaller subsidies to every tour site. That funding is intentionally flexible, and the NTP staff and advisors are available as a resource to help grantees decide how to split that money, and to offer a reference for how other artists have used the funding in the past. In addition to helping you tour in new ways, we hope that this funding can help subvert the power dynamics that often exist between presenters and artists, and give artists more agency and power in those negotiations. We recognize that this kind of negotiation requires labor, and we do have a requirement that all NTP-funded projects have a designated tour coordinator who will negotiate directly with presenters. To help reduce that burden, NTP provides an additional $10,000 on top of your grant funding, which can be used to support a tour coordinator and/or touring support. That money is released in full when you receive the grant, and you are free to spend it however you see fit.
In order to be eligible for the grant, the applicant must be a US-based theater ensemble or individual artist with identified collaborators, have a nonprofit status or a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, have one committed development partner relationship, allocate the funds among tour sites within 2 years of receiving the grant, and fulfill requirements and reports if awarded. Returning artists. All NTP-supported presentations are completed, and it has been 1 year since the last NTP-supported presentation. There's an equity reason around the criteria for returning artists. When you only give 10 grants, you have to balance grants for new artists and cannot always support the same artists. But we also know that artists grow and companies on ensembles grow, and we have to be able to support these as well. We think this is a pretty easy requirement. I know some funders require 5 years, but we didn't want to do that. Unfortunately, we aren't able to support everything, and we do have some limitations on the types of projects we can award grants to. The types of projects that are not eligible for this grant would be projects focused solely on children's and family theater. That doesn't mean that whatever the project is doesn't have that component within it, but it isn't the sole focus of the project. Projects by solo performers. We have had many projects that have a single performer on stage, but that is not the entirety of the ensemble. Projects developed by lead artists who are non-US based. In the next portion of this webinar, we're going to discuss the grant criteria. But before we do that, we want to read NEFA's Equity, Diversity, Inclusivity, and Accessibility value statement. A lot of our grant criteria was built around this statement, and it serves as a lens that all the other criteria are examined through. During grant discussions, we start by reading this statement, and advisors return to it constantly in the panel discussions. That statement is, NEFA values an equitable, diverse, and inclusive world in which we interpret as all people having fair access to the tools and resources they need to realize creative and community endeavors. We also acknowledge structural inequities that have excluded individuals and communities from opportunity based on race, gender, disability, sexual orientation, class, age, geography, culture, nation of origin, and language, and strive to counter these inequities in our work.
Now we are going to move into the criteria specific to the National Theater Project Creation and Touring Grant. I will read this word for word because this is what you will see when you go to fill out an application. And the questions that are asked in the application derive directly from these. This is also what our panelists will be looking at when they score your application. This criteria is available on our website, and we suggest you have that open as you fill out the application. NTP Creation and Touring Grants support the creation/development and US touring, virtual or in person, of new artist-led devised ensemble theater works that demonstrate excellence in the artist practice. NTP uses the following definitions in consideration of grant applications. Ensemble, a group of 2 or more people committed to working together over time to develop a distinct practice and body of work. Devised, a process of co-creation and joint discovery that prioritizes generative artists, which may include but does not prioritize playwrights, is iterative, and results in original work. Support work that contributes to the cultural and aesthetic diversities of today's theater. Reflect meaningful partnership with presenters, producers, and other organizations that are involved in the development, performance, engagement, and/or touring and promotion, virtual or in person, of the new work. Offer the potential to deepen engagement because of the work's relevance, originality, and/or timeliness. Produce a viable plan for touring, virtual or in person, the supported work in multiple communities in the US and its territories. And NEFA defines US as all 50 of the United States, as well as Puerto Rico, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, the US Virgin Islands, and American Samoa.
When we were going into the pandemic, we made a decision not to change the core structure of our grant because we believe that funding for creating and touring new work is as important now as ever. But we also recognize that everybody is coming into this application cycle from different places. Some of you probably haven't been able to get together as an ensemble in over a year. And we are trying to make our application and selection process as flexible as possible. We also know that many of your timelines and partnerships are probably up in the air right now, and that there is still more uncertainty than normal. We are having conversations with our advisors about how to read applications this year, because we know that business as usual is not an appropriate response to the pandemic. In your application, we encourage you to be honest about how the pandemic may have impacted your application or your project, and we hope you don't feel like you need to pretend everything is okay. The text on the slide is written on our application, and I am going to read it out loud now. NEFA recognizes that the combination of multiple pandemics, COVID-19, racial injustice, and economic downturn, continues to impact the ways that artists create and intend to share their work. We value your creative ingenuity during this time and the artistic experiences you still desire to share with communities and audiences, whether in person, virtually, or some imaginative combination of both. While much remains unforeseen in the arts and culture landscape, we believe in the resiliency of our field and remain committed to supporting artists' ability to thrive. Thus, as you complete your NTP proposal, we encourage you to answer all questions to the best of your knowledge and know that it is okay to still be uncertain. We invite you to lean on the NTP team as a resource as you prepare to submit your preliminary application. We know there is no one-size-fits-all response to this changing landscape, and we would love to chat with you individually to answer any questions. One big question that we get every year is, what is a development partner? A development partner is fundamental to making this work happen. We found over the 11 years that we have been doing this, that the better the relationship is with a development partner, the more likely it is that the work is going to come together in a way that feels successful for the artist. Development partners provide a variety of resources during the development of a project, and sometimes continue that support into the touring of the work. This support can include, but is not limited to, residency space, audience for work in progress showings, whether virtual or in person, administrative guidance or support, marketplace advocacy, tour planning assistance, leveraging additional funds for the project, and much more. The development partner is not required to present the finished work at any time, though many do. It is understood that the need and level of assistance between development partners and artists varies from artist to artist, but NTP believes strongly that partnerships greatly benefit the development and distribution of devised ensemble theater. The development partner does not necessarily mean a presenter. It could mean an incubator space, a service organization, work with a community you are hoping to reach, or any number of other organizations.
Creation and touring grant selection process is divided into 2 rounds. The preliminary round, which we will refer to as the inquiry round, begins in January when the grant inquiry application becomes available on the NEFA website. The inquiry application deadline is February 28th, 2022. And once we have processed all of the inquiries, we send out a panel book with all of the applications to the NTP advisors. Last year, we received over 100 applications, and we expect to receive at least that many again. So the review process takes some time. The advisors will convene in May to select 24 finalists, at which point applicants are notified of preliminary decisions. From there, finalists are invited to submit the full proposal round and are paired with an NTP advisor who serves as a project advisor during the final application development. The final application deadline is in June, and NEFA will announce the creation and touring grant recipients in August. Then in September, NEFA publishes the details of the NTP creation and touring grant recipients.
Who are the people who are making the decisions? NTP advisors provide critical guidance to the applicants in proposal preparation and tour development. They guide the project selection and serve as consultants and ambassadors for the program. They represent presenters, producing theaters, festivals, service organizations, theater artists, and former grantees. The selection of advisors takes into account geography, gender, cultural and racial equity, and includes new and established leaders in the field. A list of our current advisors can be viewed on our website.
Now we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of filling out an NTP application using NEFA's online portal. For those of you who have applied to NEFA grants in the past, you may have noticed that we have a new portal, which we have used for the first time 2 years ago. This new portal works pretty much the same way, but the layout is a little different. The process is much more streamlined and intuitive than it was before, but it might look a little different than what you're used to. So we're going to walk through it. You can access your application from NEFA.org by clicking Grants and Programs and navigating to the NTP Creation and Touring Grant page, which looks like this. This is also where we list all of our criteria and post links to the question answering session and our office hours signups. So we recommend spending some time on this page. From here, all the relevant links will be on the right. In addition to accessing your application, from here you can sign up for office hours spots with the NTP staff. When you are ready to work on the grant, you can click Apply Now to start a new application, or Resume My Application if you have already started and need to return to your form. If you use the Apply Now button, you will be starting an entirely new application, and none of the information you previously entered will be there. Once you have started an application and saved it, always use the Return to Grant application to continue where you left off. Clicking either Apply Now or Resume My Application will take you to our grant portal login, which looks like this. From here, if you have used NEFA's new portal in the last 2 years, you can go ahead and log in. If you haven't filled out a NEFA grant in the last couple of years, since we upgraded our portal, you may need to create a new account. Unfortunately, the user accounts from our old portal do not work on the new one. So if you find that your old login isn't working, that's probably why. If you have questions about this, you can email tech@nefa.org or contact the NTP staff directly. As you are creating your account, keep in mind that your system will not let you use your email address as a username. So just keep that in mind while you're picking the username. If you don't remember your password, you can click on Can't Access Your Account in order to reset that. Once you create a new account or sign in with your previous login, it will take you to the grant application. As you are filling this out, please remember to save a lot. If your computer crashes and you lose information, we can't do anything to help retrieve that. So please remember to save. You will be required to hit save before moving on to the next tab of each page. Once you save, if there are required fields you haven't filled out, the system will give you an alert, which will show up at the top of the page. If you opened an application form but don't have time to finish it, you can enter a project title and save the document with just that field filled out. Once you have saved the application with the title, you can always go back to that application form where you sign in to the online portal from the Return to My Grant application button. As you're filling out the narrative questions, we highly recommend working in a word processor as opposed to working directly in the application, as this will help with formatting and you won't be at risk of losing your work if your internet goes out. That being said, if you are working in a word processor, be aware that formatting like italics and bold will not appear in the application if you copy paste it into the online portal. When you're returning to your application, once you sign in, it will take you to a page that looks like this. It will look like the top box of this slide. Our system automatically separates the grant forms into 3 categories: requests, inquiries, and reports. The preliminary application for NTP is considered an inquiry. So in order to return to your application, you'll need to click the inquiry tab, and then your project application should show up.
If you wish to review the narrative questions beforehand, they are available on our website. All of our questions are designed to give our advisors a good representation of your work and project. The questions are, please describe the proposed new work. Describe your devising development process and how this project meets the definitions of devised and ensemble theater. This is important because this is a fundamental criteria for the grant, and the 2 definitions are critical to the decision process. Please provide your own definitions of excellence and success for this project, and any other information you think would be important for the advisors to have to fairly assess your application. We recognize that this can be a difficult question, but it's important for the advisors to understand better what they should know about the application. Beyond the collaborators and creative team, how does this project contribute to the cultural and aesthetic diversities of today's theater? Number 5, list key benchmarks in development and estimated schedule of completion. Briefly describe your relationship with the development partners named on the application and how they will contribute to the success of the project through the development, performance, engagement, and/or touring, sharing, and promotion of the work, whether virtual or in person. Number 7, describe the audiences and communities you want to reach and how you envision connecting with them through this work. This is important. This is about your vision for touring. Also, please consider that while some advisors may be familiar with your work, most will not. Please complete your application with this in mind without assumptions of what advisors may or may not know.
As part of your application, you will also be asked to submit at least one video work sample, or you can submit 2 shorter work samples. Whether you submit 1 or 2, the total combined time for the videos can be no longer than 3 minutes long. In other words, you could send in 1 3-minute clip, or you could send in 2 1.5-minute clips, but you would not be able to send in 2 3-minute clips. We wish that we could allow longer submissions, but since the advisors need to go through so many applications for this first round, we unfortunately need to limit it. If your clips go over the time limit, please include clearly labeled queue times. NTP staff will review every work sample, so if you do go over the time limit, we will get in touch to ask you to submit queue times. We recognize that video samples might be particularly tricky this year, since many of you probably have not been able to meet in person for the last year or 2, and may not have new clips to share. That is completely okay, and we are working with our advisors to shift our expectations for what a work sample should be this year. When you are submitting your work sample, there's a spot to explain the sample, and this is a great place to write any information that you hope the advisors will keep in mind as they review your sample. For example, if you are using a work sample from before the pandemic, you could explain there how your work has changed, or how you see it changing after the pandemic when you come back together to keep creating work. If you have specific questions about this, we encourage you to sign up for an office hours session with the NTP staff, or to come to our question and answering session on February 2nd. And then we can discuss the specifics of your application. As a general rule of thumb, your work sample does not necessarily need to show the work for which you are applying, but should show a recent work from within the last 4 years. Panelists will be watching these samples to get a better idea of what to expect from your project. And we encourage you to include a clip that connects to the proposed project. Work samples can be a good way to fill in gaps in your application or convey elements of your work that are hard to put into words. One of the few restrictions that we have put into place for our video samples is that promotional videos and video montages are not accepted. For the first round of applications, you can submit work samples from any streaming platform you like. Vimeo and YouTube links have seemed to work best, but you are also welcome to use Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever works best for you. Keep in mind that for the final application, you will need to submit a downloadable work sample, but for this inquiry round, it can just be streamable. It does not need to be able to be downloaded. If the video is password protected, please remember to include the password in the application. Note that NTP advisors will be watching these videos privately and on their own devices. If you have access to video clips with subtitles, we encourage you to use those. Keep in mind that if the audio is low quality or includes illegible dialogue, the advisors may miss important details. Also, since the advisors will be reviewing the applications on their own time, it is really important that you do not take the videos offline between when you submit the application and when the advisors meet to discuss the preliminary applications in May.
We really want to emphasize the importance of communication and ask that you stay in touch with us during your process. We welcome you to send an email or pick up a phone if you have any questions that come up. You may also sign up for office hours on our website, www.nefa.org/events/National Theater Project office hours. Thank you to our funders, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, and on behalf of the NTP team, myself, Keita Sullivan.
And me, Derek Schwartz.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.